What's happening in the canine industry? For all the latest news, views, and expert opinions, stay right here for the Canine Paradigm. You'll hear from industry leaders, experts, doyens of the industry, learned colleagues, movers and shakers, and the odd randy guest. Get the latest insights and expert advice from both here and abroad from the people in the know. Now, here are your hosts, Glenn Cook and Pat Stewart. And I'm Lofty Fulton, and I'm out of here.
Glenda?
Yes.
We have to do a new ad.
We do.
It's a solemn time. Our long-time sponsor of the show, George Kittredge,
Yes.
very, very sadly passed away. And we formerly used to advertise for him his Rowdy Hound boxes.
We did.
So we don't actually know what's happened with Rowdy Hound boxes. You know anything about that?
I looked at the website. It said that they're recalibrating since their founder and boss has passed. But nonetheless, I think that you and I want to honour the memory of George Kittredge anyway. He was a friend to both of us, a hell of a good guy, and he supported us almost immediately. He was on board through and through, and I just don't want any of us to forget George. He was a terrific human being.
So we intend to continue to advertise Rowdy Hound, even though we don't know what's going on with them.
Yep.
In the hopes that they keep going, and that can be a bit of George's legacy that we're able to continue to promote.
I hope so.
In checking it out, we had a look to see, because we're not real good with the sponsorship. So we had a look to see who's actually paying for sponsorship. And we have a list of people to tell you that we support. And the first is our sugar mama, Barbara de Groot.
She's been with us from the start as well. Barbara's been an absolute staple in our...
She's a gem.
She is a gem.
She has a business.
She does. From the Heart Dog Training.
From the Heart Dog Training.
Yep.
You can check it out. But she supports us as much and more than anybody ever has. So we appreciate you very much, Barbara. Another person who's supported us from the start.
The Einzelwiener.
Einzelwiener.
The Bullfed.
The Bullfed.
Yep.
It's where I get all my stuff.
Yeah.
It is, truly. It's where I get all my dog gear. If I need something, Jason's my first point of call. I don't use his shit website. He has a website. It's dog shit. I just message him directly. You guys probably should use his shit website, but I don't.
Yeah, because you don't want to message him directly and get his grumpy ire of the day.
Yeah, but do it. Get all your dog stuff from Jason. He's got everything you need. He's got all the shit that you need to train a dog for realty.
Everybody who comes to seminars and looks at meals and asks me meals questions, ask Jason.
Yeah.
Jason can point you in the right direction for getting the meal that's best suited for you.
I really like his leashes. I'm a big fan of his leash pack. That's why I sort of convinced him to do it. But anyway, get your stuff from Einzelwiener.
Yep.
Do you know who has a fantastic website and ships internationally?
My wife?
Your wife,
Yeah.
Canine Pharmaceuticals.
I couldn't imagine her not having a good website, how much of a perfectionist she is.
Well, the products are amazing. My dog merely being alive is a walking testimonial to that. My dog, who I've retired numerous times and has come out of retirement when I've managed to get his body back to healthy. And a big part of that is related to Canine Pharmaceuticals. So check it out, everybody.
I could say so many nice and biased things about Canine Pharmaceuticals and my wife, but what I will say is ignore me. Just look at testimonials. The testimonials speak for themselves. That's where the field trials are working. What makes Narelle's day, and mine as well, is when people are emailing in and sending messages of, well, primarily people have had no hope in the past because just everything that they were trying wasn't working, and now it is. And that is the testament that something is actually really working. And the other thing which I will add, one of the things that Narelle's told me in the past is dogs are incapable of understanding the placebo effect.
Oh, that's a good point.
So you can fake it on a human, but you can't fake it on a dog.
I never thought about that before. That's actually a really good point.
Well, my wife's actually a very smart person.
There you go.
So she's told me that humans are subject to the placebo effect where dogs are not. So it either works or it doesn't on dogs.
There you go. That makes total sense.
Yep.
There's one other person who puts a fair amount of work into this show.
Yeah.
It's me.
Yeah. Funny about that.
And I have a digital product that you can buy. If you go to my website, seriousdogbusiness.com, right now I've got 2 courses available to you. The Overview, which is a small course where you could learn how I teach.
Yep.
But the other one is the Wave Tops, which is a bigger course. It's everything I know about dog training. Well, it's not everything. It's a lot of what I know about dog training.
Yeah,
Check it
terrific.
out.
Yeah.
$500 dues. That's all it's going to cost you.
I recommend it when people are saying, what do I do? How do I get in the industry? I recommend them to your course.
Oh, wonderful. Thanks,
Yeah.
sir. All right, on with the show. Welcome back to the Canine Paradigm. I'm your host, Pat Stewart, and I'm joined today by my co-host, Glenn Cook.
Hello, sir. What's news?
No news, plodding along, daily life, being a dog trainer. What's going on with you?
Busy. Narelle's been radically busy, which has been fantastic. Today I've been helping support her with a few things because her business is blowing up. People are getting excited about it. She's starting to get into a few bigger entities. A lot more vets are starting to get onto the natural side of treating dogs, which is fantastic. So I'm pretty proud of her. She's doing a great job with it. And
Nice.
as you know, it's been a big push of mine now to start encouraging people look at behavior through diet as well. Explore the two of them as a symbiotic relationship rather than just treating one and hoping the other one isn't going to be part of the problem. Why not investigate both of them? And people have been. Like, I'm speaking to trainers, professionals around the world on a regular basis who are not only curious about it, but have also got data that they want to share with me as well, which whenever I get anything like that that's interesting, I pass it on to Narelle and we have a good discussion about it. So those are the things that I've been trying to focus on, is expanding my knowledge on it. Not so much that I'm just a shill for people saying, oh, you're just a company man, you're just talking about it because it's a company thing. I'm excited about it because it's nice to see all the skeptics who have been coming at it from a distance, but then embraced it and come back and said, fuck man, I wish I'd done this sooner. Or, I'm embarrassed that I didn't explore something like this at an earlier pace. And I'm saying, yeah, man, I'm exactly the same. Like, I went decades without really exploring this sort of principle. Like, I dipped my toe in. So I kind of did the canine diet hokey pokey where you put your left foot in, your left foot out. But now I'm all in. Like, I'm totally invested in it because it's the real deal. Like I said, I've seen this from the mountains as well. It wouldn't matter if it's our business or somebody else's product. It fucking works. Like, it's just a reality. If you're into behavior and you're trying to diagnose behavioral problems, then you need to be talking about this. Like, it needs to be part of your discussion. You need to expand your knowledge on what you're actually doing as far as treating dogs, because if you treat one side of it, you're missing a whole side of it that's going to have a profound effect on it anyway. So as I've said before, listen to me, don't listen to me, Prestige Worldwide.
I love it. Hey, I got a topic I want to talk about today.
What's that?
I want to talk about training progressions. I've been training a lot of dogs at the moment for other people, right? So I've been putting my hands onto lots more dogs than I have. In the last month, I've just been, business changes all the time, right? Sometimes I'm sitting here talking to people about dog training. Other times I'm filming content about dog training. And then, it comes and goes in waves where I'm hands-on lots of dogs. I get brought into kennel spaces and asked to, help dogs get over the line in certain things and blah, blah, blah. So I've been hands-on a lot of dogs lately. And with dogs that have handlers that I'm assisting with get over the line, some that I'm like mostly focused on the handler to get their skills better for the dog, and then others where it's just me and the dog and I'm expected to get the dog to a certain point. The constant theme that has been coming up a lot lately for me in training has been that training is messy, right? So one of the things that has really reared its head quite a lot is when I get brought into somewhere, and especially when there's eyes on, right? Like the whole hierarchy of the organization is there, and whether it's a government organization or it's a training club or whatever it is, for the most part, people are looking while I'm there to give advice and to help them train the dogs. They're looking to create these sessions that go really well, right? And as a result, we often end up doing these really peculiar things because it's just what the dog is good at in that moment on the day, rather than like actually looking to make progress. And it sort of dawned on me a couple of weeks ago. It's like a lot of people are afraid of making mistakes or having a session where they don't reach the outcome that they're looking to achieve. And I want to sort of talk with you a little bit and explore and remind myself and others of the way that if you bring a dog out and you have an idea in mind of what you're working towards, or you are doing a session, right? If everything goes perfectly well in that session, you are not really training. You're at best maintaining, but for the most part, I usually sort of think of that as like a demonstration. Like, here it is. This is what the dog is capable of in this moment, in this time. But we're not pushing the envelope then. We're not looking to make any progress at that point. And it always reminds me of the idea of flow state, right? Of like where flow state is 80% success. And there has to be those errors. There has to be times where you go like, oh, I went too far, or oh, I did too much, or oh, I did too little, or whatever the variable that gets measured is, so that there's a new learning moment. those 20% of the times where things go wrong, so long as the training is set up, and this is the other thing I want to explore with you as well, like so long as the training is set up so that when something goes wrong, the correct learning moment occurs, then that's how progress is actually made. Progress is not made by everything going perfectly. I mean, certainly it's not fair to say that no progress is made, but progress is made so tediously slow when there is never any like, oh, it shouldn't have gone that way. Because learning is when you have an expectation and that expectation is not met. There's some sort of new thing that happens and then you go, oh, right, well, that's new. This thing led to this new variable and now I'm aware of that. Therefore, I have learnt, right? Like that's what learning is. But when it's just like, oh, this thing goes the way exactly as I thought it would, you're not learning anything in that moment.
A very interesting observation, and one that I agree that a lot of people now get spooked by it because they're having that misconception of the perfect outcome, mainly because, again, I'm sounding like an echo chamber by saying this, but they get on social media. Social media shows you the glamour. It's like old films where they used to show women filmed in a certain lens, you know, like it was this beauty lens where they had a stocking over the screen or something like that, which gave them this beautiful shimmer. And it's like filters that you see on Instagram where people are constantly showing their face through a filter because they're not happy to show you the reality of this is what my real face or my real head looks like. I need to put a filter on. I need you to see me in a different light in a different way. It's a bit of trainer vanity as well. Like we kind of expect everything has to go perfect because that's the way the world has shaped us to think. That's not real. It's never been real. When you and I talked about this concept earlier, I think you wanted the title to be something like training is messy or something like that. It is, and it should be, and that's part of the fun of it. It's like getting a bag of rope that's tied itself into knots, and you're really disappointed that you wanted the rope to be straight, but you got a bunch of knots there. But then you're sitting there and you're working it out and you're getting those knots out and you can start to see like I'm nearly at the end, like I'm getting all of these knots out. Even though you started with disappointment, the fact that you got them all done, you feel like you've got a sense of completion. I know that I'm sort of jumping into a little bit of an example, but the only reason I say that is because I had a rope the other day that was in the garage that I had to get out and it had like 4 knots in it, 4 good hard knots in it. And I thought to myself, oh, I'm so disappointed I'll let those knots get in there like that. But I sat down on the chair and instead of getting pissed off about it and being upset about it, I thought there's nothing else I can do other than undo these knots, like systematically work it through. I need the rope. I need to use it. I need to work these knots out. And the same thing happens with dogs, mate. It's never not been the same way anytime I've got a dog out. And in fact, a point that you made before is there are times where something has gone abnormally well. And I think to myself, how did that happen to be? Like, how did that picture play itself out that way? The reason is because sometimes the dog just fluked the behavior and has no idea what it did, and it can't trace its way back there. It's just an anomalous behavior. So sometimes the dog is like, it's bouncing around in this behavioral sphere. It doesn't understand what you want or what it needs to do in order to finish the session or make the session go well. And then it does it and you think, oh my God, the dog did an amazing job. We're there. We made it. How good is that? And especially if people are around to see it and you think, oh yeah. And sometimes you're funneling in that direction. So it's like the dog tips into the funnel. You're doing the right thing by being an exceptional handler or a good trainer or whoever you want to identify at the time. But you're doing the right thing anyway because you're certainly tipping the dog into that sphere. But sometimes the dog has no idea that it fell into that sort of category. It just did the behavior. The mistake that you make then is expecting the dog to repeat it on day 2. And the dog goes, well, what are we doing here? What do you want? And it's kind of looking at you like, I don't know what the fuck you want. And it tries to do a similar or alternate behavior and then you get upset about it if you're not clued into what's actually happening. If you are clued into what's happening, you look at it and say, all right, my friend, I can see that you don't understand that you went probably 4 ticks down from where you needed to be. What you did was you made a mistake. So we'll gauge it back. And that's the intelligence of knowing what you're doing in shaping is to understand, like, let's just scale this back. Let's find out what you do know. What do you know, or what can I sort of edge you towards gently that's not too far down the road of massive expectations.
Mm. It's funny to talk about social media being a trigger for this. I know that's something that we've brought up many times, but I was thinking the other day, like something triggered me to remember it. It must have been something that did come up in my social media. How ironic. But do you remember that old Robin Williams movie, 1 Hour Photo?
Oh, yeah.
Where he's the photo developer and he sees the photos of people's happy lives, because this is at a time like pre even digital cameras where people are getting their film photos. And film being what it is, like you don't take junk photos. You know, like these days, if you imagine you're taking a group photo these days, everybody lines up, you take 50 photos, there's 8 different cameras. Everybody then goes through all the different photos to see which one ended up with a good one. And then everyone texts, it goes into the group chat or the airdrop or whatever, and everybody gets the best version of the photo. Whereas it used to be like you wind the disposable camera, you point vaguely in the direction of where you want to take a photo and you click and you find out several weeks later what the outcome of that was, right?
And it was like $10 to get the film printed.
Yeah. The movie, for people who don't know it, is about the guy, he's the developer, right? So he's actually printing the photos and all he's got this very sad, lonely existence. And all he sees is these happy photos of people, right? And he sees these like photos of family gatherings and stuff like that. And he imagines that's what their lives are. And then it takes a like really creepy sort of horror turn when he decides that he's going to put himself into the lives of these people. But that was such a profound movie. I remember watching that and being like, oh, holy fuck, like that's true. That's what people think. Like everybody thinks everybody has these only happy moments. But behind closed doors, we have these completely different lives. And now we are all experiencing that en masse, right? Like we are all putting that into our brains first thing in the morning and last thing all through the day and before we go to bed. It's a tricky one. And not to get out my tiny violin and play it, but it's a tricky one for people like me because my work is heavily social media based, right? So like I rely on people looking at social media and therefore I need to be knowing what's going on social media. I need to be checking what's going on. But I tend to addiction. There's no denying that, right? I have all the dopamine receptors in all the ways where I can get addicted to things really quickly and really easily. That's why I'm very careful about how I live my life because it's so easily for me to just go down the rabbit hole on so many things. I think, with social media, I saw a hilarious post the other day, again on social media, talking about like, yeah, of course I have anxiety. Every morning I look at the opinion of the craziest fucking people on the planet.
Exactly.
Like that's
exactly.
Every morning I wake up while my brain is nice and fresh and I read the opinion of the 1,000 fucking craziest people. And then I live my day through that lens. And then before I go to bed, just to make sure that I give myself some more anxiety, I sit there and I scroll again and retake in a few more opinions of some more fucking lunatics before I go to bed, right? So like I saw that and I was like, oh, that's profound. But for us, it is exactly as you say. Like what we see is a lot of people, and people are posting their wins and good for them. Like I'm absolutely not saying people should post differently. Like I don't control you. Post whatever the fuck you want on social media. But I think that you have to remember that when you're observing somebody else's social media, you're looking at like their wins, their highlight reel. This is the things that went well for me today. And it kind of has to be that because otherwise it would be boring. Like, I don't want to see you eating your fucking breakfast. Like, I want to see one pretty photo of your beautiful breakfast before you eat it. And then that's it. I don't want to see you sitting there the boring rest of your day, right? And that's, of course, not to say that everybody does that. There's plenty of trainers. And I think it's the people who are trainers and teach other people, like myself and like many others, who it doesn't serve me. Like I went through a phase of doing it and I still do it every now and again. If I have a good win, if something goes really well, I'm like, oh, cool, look at this. There was one recently, right, where I was working a dog and it was going for a flea bite. I was on the long line. It bit just kind of, by happenstance, the way the decoy stood, the timing of the dog arriving there, it ended up being that the dog ended up biting the decoy like in the ass rather than in the knee. We just happened to get it on camera that I like hand over handed down the line, choked the dog off and put it in the exact same right spot, like in this really amazing fluid motion. It's a giant fluke, right? Like it just panned out like that. Then we just happened to get it on film. And so of course I posted it, right? Like, of course I did. But I wouldn't post if the times where I'm like, oh, fuck, dog's in the wrong spot. And I have to like get down there and it's clunky and weird. And I have to like spend an inordinate amount of time trying to get the dog back on. The dog's wrestling over like I wouldn't post that because that's not fun to watch, right? Like, so I get it. Like I'm totally not saying that people should be posting differently on social media. What I am saying is that that is not how training always goes, right? Like, and your training shouldn't look like the training of others on social media. And even the very best trainers in the world constantly have things going wrong in their session. And that is why they're the best trainers in the world, right? Because when those things go wrong, they're set up for it. They're ready for it. They're in a position to give the dog the learning moment, and that's how you make progress. And I was reminded, I was working dogs recently at a place, and I said to everybody there, I was like, the only bad session that is possible to happen today is if a dog comes out, no matter what our intention is in that session, the only way that we can say this was a bad session was if we cannot bring engagement to the handler through the dog in this environment. That's the only way we're going to get to call anything a bad session, because we can have all these goals in place of what we want to achieve. And if we get here and it's not working, we are going to be set up. We have the lines, we have the facilities, we have the people, we have everything in place to give the dog the learning moment that it needs to have. And if we have gone too far, and if we get out of that 80% success rate and we start getting into an area where we're starting to think, oh, maybe we're setting the dog back here, like the dog is not understanding it, we can wind the session back, and we can just continually wind the session back until we find the point where the dog is able to find success at a rate that allows us to call that successful training, and for us to think, yeah, we're making progress with this dog. And we can just continually wind that back until we find that level. And the only time, like in my mind, the only time that I would say, oh, okay, yeah, I'm putting that in the category, that was a bad session, that set us back, is if we, because of the environment that we're in and the reinforcers that are available to the dog externally versus with us, right? Something that we would bring the engagement of, we can't in that moment get the engagement of the dog. That's the only way that I can say, yeah, we had a bad session. We don't necessarily need to be making a ton of progress on the thing that we're working on, but we do need to be making progress on the trainability of the dog in that environment. And so if we bring the dog out with an intention of teaching it how to engage with the handler, let me rephrase, like we're bringing the dog out to teach it how to do outs, right? We've got a sticky outing issue with the dog. And the dog is so fixated on other people around in the area or the environment or whatever that we go, okay, we're not even going to work on this out because we've got an engagement issue. That session then just becomes about like dial in on the handler. Just find a way to bring the motivation of the dog into you so that you can re-stick the dog to you instead of in the environment. And so long as we can achieve that, I get to say at the end, like, tick, we did really good. This wasn't a great setup. This wasn't the ideal place to do that. And we still have to fix the issue that we intend to fix, but we will find another time. We'll find another place. We'll find a different environment where we can be more attuned to have that be the thing that is the problem for us in the session and allow us to make progress there, rather than pretending we don't have this other problem. For me, the big one, and it's why I have spent so much time teaching dogs to out recently, is because I tell this to everybody everywhere I go. Early in my dog career, I decided I was never having problems with an out. And years ago when I was at the ICP conference and I heard Tobias Gustafsson say the exact same thing, I was like, oh, my heart. I was like, I knew I loved this guy, but now I really know that I do. Because I was like, this is something I will never gloss over. I'll never, ever gloss over that. If you bring the dog out, no matter what we're working on, and your intention is to reinforce the dog with something that it eventually has to let go of, if you have to fight it, to have it let go of the thing. If there's a ton of compulsion that have to be used, if there's a conflict that immediately arises between the handler and the dog at the idea of getting the thing off the dog, then I'm like, that's what we're working on. That's all we're working on. Because chances are the actual problem behavior that you've got me here to work on, which is probably like impulse control, or it's probably like the dog not following commands when it's told to at certain intervals because it's focused on whatever. All these things that you've asked me to work on, we probably don't have to work on them. We probably just have to fix this out. And that's the source of the problem. Because if when the dog does something well and you reinforce the dog and you go like, hey, good work, here's the reinforcer, and then there has to be a fight before you can do another rep, you're not going to make progress. So we wind it back. And then people go, oh, well, this was a disaster. It didn't go well. And I'm like, no, it went great because now the dog can out. And now in the next session, we can do the things, right? Like we can actually work on the thing and the conflict will have been gone. So that's my rant, especially my rant about outing.
It's a good rant. That little bit at the end that you just covered over, we need to pick that open a little bit more because there's often times where I've had this conversation with people that I've been training, whether it's been one-on-one or group training. That same paradigm has been brought to my attention where people have said, I've had this problem, I've been to people before, or I've tried to work it out, and suddenly I find myself, I'm now in more conflict with the dog. Like it seems that the situation has blown apart. You've exposed it many times, and you and I talk about it, laugh about it, explore it, where you're on this really spiritual journey at the moment, like you're really invested in the emotional side, harmonies and vibrations and so forth, which I think is great. Because if you go into any room and you know that the room is not a happy room, people are not happy to see you, or there has been something that's happened that you can really feel the energy of the room drop. How do you, as a human being, feel in that moment when you walk into that room?
You feel kind of jammed up. That's how I feel. When you go into a space and you're like, it's not like, this is not a happy, fun, or at least light environment, I feel stiff and
Exactly.
I feel jammed up.
So at that point in time, you don't feel at your best. You don't feel creative. You don't feel humorous. You don't feel like opening up. You don't feel like exploring. And I feel that this is something that people really need to identify with their dogs as well, because as you start to manifest all of those feelings and all of those energies, and I'm not making this ethereal, it's genuine, it's real. They've done experimentation on this multitudes of times with young children where adults have entered the room and they've either been in a humorous mood and you can see the creativity and the openness of the child, and the child wants to explore new behaviors and do new things and build on what they're doing, whereas they've reversed that and they brought an adult in the room who's not addressing the child down, the adult is addressing another adult in the room down. And they did this with Bobo the clown, that experiment as well. These other experiments, when adults have been addressing adults in a room and they've been like disappointment, and it's been a chastising sort of environment. The child has withdrawn, it stopped playing, it stopped being creative, it stopped being open, and then becomes afraid. And then sometimes it even needs to be swaddled by the parent or the comforter in the room. So it's no surprise that when dogs are dealing with that same sort of situation, that their creativity and their openness to explore and build on behaviors is now starting to shut down, because you're not in a frame of mind where you can explore it further or open this behavior up that needs to be opened up. The whole point you're there is because you're trying to develop something, you're trying to shape something, you're trying to bring something to life. And if all you're doing is crushing it, like all of the energies you're doing, whether that be physical or emotional energies, are sitting there compounding on top of the dog, then the dog is thinking, I don't really like doing this. I don't really like being here. So the environment is not one of reinforcement or exploratory behaviors. The environment is now one of punishment. The dog's starting to feel we're on the negative of that negative effect that we often talk about when we're trying to explore either a positive reinforcement or a negative reinforcement sort of basement, but it's not. It's all in a negative limbo. And that's what it takes for that person to really start embracing change in themselves in order to change the environment. How do I know all this? Because I've done it myself. I've done it on a regular basis. And now that I'm more intellectual about it, because I've been around people who have caught me or have watched other people doing it, I'm thinking to myself, that's why this is not going the way that I predicted it would go, because my attitude is one of aggression or one of hostility or one that's suppressing. It's a suppressive type of behavior. You know, Narelle and I were talking a while ago and she asked me a question and I repeated myself. She asked me the question again and I raised my voice and she said, that's not helping. And I thought, you're right. Yeah, 100% right. It's not helping. And the funny thing is I think his name's Stephen Bartlett, Diary of a CEO, the guy who has that podcast. He said that he did the same thing with his wife. And it was literally a week after this incident happened. It wasn't an incident. It was just a normal communication error. But he was talking to a guest and he said, my wife said sometimes the way that I talk to her doesn't help. Narelle had said that to me. She said it didn't help the fact that I asked you the question and you repeated yourself in a kind of condescending way and then you elevated your voice. She said, the reason I asked you is because I didn't understand what you wanted. You clearly did, but I didn't. I had a different picture in my mind. In a slide presentation I do when I do some talks to people, I have a picture of a person standing at one end and a dog at the other, and in between them is a communication balloon, but it's supposed to be like Lego where they're supposed to plug together, but it doesn't. You can see that it's conflicting. And that's the communication error. When you're in that communication error mode, there is no point in going further and addressing it without changing what is not working. And that's where we refuse to do it. And that's why we start to see things starting to erode. And that's, like I think I spoke about this a while ago. That's one of my buzzwords at the moment is working on teaching people not to have erosion in their training process, is to start thinking about why is this going wrong? What am I doing? Because it's often not really the dog. It's the environment you place it in. It's your poor terms of communication. We can say that there are certain things that are genetic compound, which you're not going to easily change about the dog. And I'm not going to fight you on that. I'm not going to fight you at all. There are genetic components that are going to make it very difficult to make headway with certain types of dogs when they have that predisposition. But when we're talking about something that's moldable behavior, I am going to fight you on that. That's the hill that I will die on, because I'll say to you the same thing that you said before, Pat, why didn't you reduce what you were doing? Why didn't you look at taking the dog further away from the stimuli? Why didn't you reduce the session? Why didn't you change the reinforcer? You did a great session a while ago when we were talking about that triangle where, like if you change one of the things in the triangle, you may find that you'll get a better end result with the dog. We need to do this as communicators with people as well when we're teaching, because ultimately this is what we're doing when we get on social media or when we do podcasts or when we sit before people. How many dogs have booked a lesson with you and said, hey, I just want to sort out this fucking problem? It's, like it's people that we're talking to and it's people that we're trying to resolve these issues with. We're fundamentally coaching and educating people on how to do this better. We often talk about how we need to make all these processes in order to make our dogs a better student, but really what we need to do is be better at communicating with people in order to help them. And that's where I think I keep coming back to my issue with social media, is because sometimes it just makes it look so perfect and so unreachable that people look at it and go, and they just fold the screen down or they flick left or right, because I think I can't do that. I just don't understand how you got there. And of course you don't, because that's 50 steps beyond what you actually know. This is why it's important that people, when you do feel like that, is you embrace coaching. You reach out to somebody and say, hey man, you got there. Like that's so far beyond what I wanted to do, but it's a goal now. I'm like it. I'm interested in it. How did you get there? Good coaches, if they're worth their salt and they're good communicators and they care about teaching people, is they'll say to people, let's start all the way at the beginning. And your beginning may be different to old mate's beginning. It often is. You have to find out what's your beginning, what's your dog's beginning. And each time we teach a behavior, it's a new beginning all over again. So we have to find out what is that beginning.
You open the door, so I'm going to keep it a little bit open. The stuff that I'm really into at the moment, I'm really going down a deep rabbit hole in spirituality stuff. And one thing that has been really beneficial is I did this meditation recently, and you had to sort of say this thing out loud and then have a sense of where that came from in your body, right? So the point of the meditation is to bring you into your body and sort of identify some stuff. But you just had to say a sentence and then where did that come from? And it talks you through kind of identifying where in your body that word came from. And then the voice on the guided meditation thing says, wherever it was, that's perfect. It really stuck with me. I think about that a lot now when people come to me and they're like, oh, the fucking dog does this. I'm like, whatever he does right now, that's perfect for him, right? But we can change it and we can start putting into play a bunch of things that will help guide that behavior towards whatever it is we want it to do. And if we've mastered all these things, because, everything to me at these days, that's why I restructured all my online course, and all the way that I teach everything is now under those headings of motivate, communicate, coach. When I brought it to that, like when I was teaching and it was more like a NEPOPO structure, it even changed the order that I would teach things in, like where I would say the importance of like classical conditioning versus operant conditioning, and like the order that I teach those in. Because like to me, I found it more helpful in the past to make sure that when I was teaching my like 1-day presentation seminar type stuff or the online course stuff, to have people understand classical conditioning first and then talk about operant conditioning. And there's definitely pros to why I did that. But when I reframed everything and started to think in terms of motivation, communication, and then coach, I now teach about operant conditioning first, right? And I like people to understand that before they go into classical conditioning, because operant conditioning is much more about understanding motivation, because you don't necessarily need to communicate. Like a dog is operant when it's aware of the outcomes of its behavior, right? So like when it spontaneously or by choice does anything and there's a consequence, good or bad, for action or inaction, right? That's operant. And then classical conditioning is more about communication. This now puts into motion a sequence of events. And so for me, when I reframed everything to really be what is about motivation, what is about communication, and then how do we bring those two things together and call that coaching the dog, now I look at every session through that lens. I'll use a real life example so that we're not just talking so ethereally. I think me and you have a habit of doing that because we don't want to name anyone that we're working with. You know what I mean? Like we don't want to be too specific so that we don't upset anybody or out anybody that we're working with. But let's just pick a behavior, one that most people will want to teach, regardless of whether you're in like high-end working dog stuff or if you're an average pet dog owner. A down on a recall, I think, is a really cool thing for a dog to be able to do, like a down at distance. So the down when the dog is doing whatever it is, whether it's just chilling out at distance or it's you've already called it and on the recall back you want to stop it. That's something that in the protection sports we're usually assessed against. In PSA, that comes in the level 2. And it's one of the real world behaviors that when pet dog owners say to me, what are the key behaviors a dog has to have? A down at distance is one of them for me. Because in reality, all a pet dog really needs beyond manners, in my opinion, like if you're going to like proof a few behaviors, you've got the manners of the dog to live within your life. Sweet. Like walk on a loose leash, but a dog's got to come back when I call it and it's got to stay where it is when I tell it to. And with those two behaviors, I can keep a dog out of danger, right? Like, hey, there's a problem over there. Quick, get back to me and I'll protect you from the problem. Or the problem is between you and I. You stay right where you are and I'll come to you, right? So like the down at distance, the down on recall is one of the things I think everybody should have with their dog really reliably. And so I want to use that as an example. When someone comes to me and they say, hey, like I've got issues with the dog downing on the recall. The dog isn't downing on the recall. The first thing I'm going to say is like, okay, how's our motivation, right? Like, have we got something that we can convince the dog that it's a good idea to do that with? And what's that motivation look like? Because we've got motivation towards and away, and we're building a behavior here. So we're not interested in punishment. So the aversives that we might intend to use in this session, if we go that way, they're going to be aversions that create behavior. So negative reinforcement. And if we've got a dog that does something that we want, we need motivation to tell it, hey, we want you to do that again. So positive reinforcement. So I say to people like, okay, well, where's our reinforcers at? Because do we, first of all, have a way to say to the dog at distance, something awesome will happen to you there, right? Do we have that? Have we developed a way to do that? Does the dog have some level of understanding of the possibility of that? Okay, yes or no, we get that answer and we decide we have to get that if we don't. And then we say, okay, but now is the dog used to some form of compulsion that we can build behaviors with, and that compulsion be able to be done at those distances? Does it know, like, can we put a long line on the dog? Are we using electrics? Like, how's this going to work? Like, we have to have a plan of how to do that. So then we can tick the motivation box of like, all right, cool. Then we say, okay, the dog already knows how to down, right? Like that, we're not trying to get a down at distance if we don't have a down right in front of us. Does the criteria... Now we go into communication, right? Like, does the criteria of what your dog knows as a down allow that to even happen at distance? Because I think that's one of the things when we go into communication, people often forget that when you have taught your dog any behavior, and let's go with a down, the dog has decided what a down looks like, right? Like the dog has a checklist in its mind of what downing is. And when you get really precise, that can be even the way that they enter the behavior, but what that behavior is, like to certain people, the dog must be in a sphinx type position with its tail up like a scorpion and its ears up. Cool. And its belly absolutely flat on the ground. Cool. If that's the criteria, that's the criteria. But other people might have the looser criteria. I don't care. So long as the dog stays where it is, sort of lays on its side, kicks its hip out, that's fine. Okay, cool. Perfect. If that's fine to you, that's fine to you. But then are we sure that's how the dog interprets it, right? Because a lot of the time, a dog won't even down behind you because most people have taught the down with food or a lure of some kind or whatever right in front of them. So if you turn your back on the dog and tell it to down, it's going to run around in front of you and down in front of you. And so that poor dog, he doesn't understand that he can down at distance. He has no way to understand that because the down has such a proximal relationship to you that it may as well be a heel that you're saying. While your dog's out at distance and you're telling him to down, he's actually thinking like, yeah, I absolutely will the moment I get within the food delivery range of you. So those are the sorts of things we have to explore. Do we have a way to tell the dog he's doing a good job or make him do the good job that we want? That's motivation, right? Do we have communication? Well, do we have the behavior or a version of it? And what is the dog's understanding of it when we say that? So can we find a way to build that? And once we've ticked those two boxes, now we can actually begin to train. Like now we can say like, okay, the actual thing that you intended to work on, we can now work on. But if we don't have those other things, we have to build those first, right? And so that's what, like, when I mean about training's never linear and training can be messy, because sometimes people come to me and they say, hey, I want help with this particular behavior. And I go, cool. Do we have those things? Oh, no, we don't have those. Like, okay, well, we need to get them. No, but I came for help with the down at distance. I'm like, cool, got it. But if you don't have an adequate way to tell the dog, hey, you did a great job, if while you're trying to tell the dog to down at distance and you say, yeah, I've got the ball, but we're asking him to down at distance in a field full of birds and smells and all the other dogs and the things that the dog could be interested in, if the ball isn't of higher value to those things, then we have to achieve that first. We have to get you good enough at reinforcing the dog. We have to find the thing. If it's not the ball, it's something else, or maybe it's the way that you play, like whatever it is, we have to bring that to actually be a reinforcer. The thing we intend to reinforce the dog with has to increase the frequency and likelihood of the behavior. The dog has to want it, right? And then when we say like, okay, well, you can use negative reinforcement. Okay, well, like, how does your dog understand those tools? Because a lot of the times the people think that their dogs understand their tools of negative reinforcement. They're actually tactile cues, right? Like you're actually not negatively reinforcing the dog with this thing. You're telling the dog to do a specific behavior. Every time the leash goes tight, the dog knows that's a specific thing. And so I've seen people like who have only ever used their leash to say fix their heel position because all of their leash work has been short range. And then they put the prong collar on the dog on a long line at distance and they say down and somebody else helps them give the pop. And the dog's like, fucking hell, like I am trying as hard as I can to get to the position because that prong collar pop means getting to the heel position. But I can't because I'm being restricted by this leash, and enter comes all the conflict, right? So like it's about having all of these things in place. And when we have all of them, actually teaching the dog to down at distance becomes super fucking easy. But that's what I mean about training is messy, because that to the average, well, to many people that I explain that to, that sounds like discombobulated soup. Because no, I want a down at distance. We should be working on the down at distance. And I'm like, yeah, like, of course, you can find someone who will crank your dog into that. And we can play pretendies. And in this specific environment, we can make that happen. And we can make it look like it's on cue here. But if we want to have true understanding, we have to go back and go through all of these steps. And we have to establish all those steps in a way where they work, right? Like where we can then go, okay, cool. Like here in my shop, the dog plays with the ball. Sweet. Amazing. You got total engagement. The dog's not interested in anything else. Mad. Love it. Let's go outside. Oh, we've lost the dog. Okay, well, now we got to do this thing. I'm going to put the roller door up and we're going to play inside and we're going to play out the roller door. And as we start to get to the point where we can see the dog starting to disengage, we're going to simmer at that bit, right? And then we're going to come back in for a little while and then we're going to go past there. All these things to get this goddamn down at distance, right? Like we've got to build all these things piece by piece. And so it's always a mess, but it feels like a mess, but it never is, right? Like when you have those steps in mind when we say, okay, I am going to establish my way of motivating the dog and making sure that I can convey, like I can make the dog feel what I want it to feel in the place I want it to feel it. Cool. Now we say, how do I put that on command? How do I tell the dog these things? How do I make sure that me and the dog are on the same page? Am I sure that the dog's criteria of the behavior even allows him to do the thing that I'm asking him to do? Then I can bring all that together and develop a guide path of putting those things in place to actually solve the behavior. So very often when people come to see training, when they're either doing this with me or I'm doing it with somebody else and someone's watching, whatever, you can have a session where the dog doesn't do any of the things that we wanted. So long as we tick those boxes, we're making progress in those boxes. It's not about the down at distance. It's about giving us the pieces that will one day allow for the down at distance. I've walked away from sessions going, fuck, that went great. We had such an impactful learning moment in that session. This is great. People are like, that was terrible. The dog didn't down at distance once. And we're like, no, not once. We didn't even get to the point where that was what we could work on. But we encountered a problem. We gave the dog the learning moment that will serve us better in the next session. Like that thing is never going to be a problem for us again because we solved that problem today. So it fucked up this session, but it's never going to fuck up another session for us again because we solved that problem. And we keep moving forward like that. That's dog training. That's what we do. That's how we train all these behaviors. We're talking about a down at distance just as one arbitrary example. It's how all dog training has to be. And if you're looking to actually train a behavior and it's not going well, chances are that's not the problem, right? Like the problem is in the foundation and you got to go back and find out what that foundation is. That's my rant about it. That's my waffle.
Another rant, another waffle, but a good one.
It's an
important one. Interesting. You used the word a discombobulated soup before. As you said that, for some reason, it sprung into my mind the very first version of Coming to America with Eddie Murphy. Oh, yeah. There's often scenes. There was
Good morning, my new neighbors. Shut the fuck up. I would say, fuck you. It's like, yes, fuck you too.
Terrific movie. If you haven't seen it, you should see it. There's several parts in the movie where he goes in and sees a couple of barbers. It's Eddie Murphy playing himself and Arsenio Hall playing themselves. They're all playing themselves as different roles. The reason I'm bringing this up with Coming to America, there's a part in there that reminded me when you talked about the discombobulated super behavior because he told a joke. He said, this guy is in a restaurant and he says to the waiter, hey, waiter, can you taste my soup? He says, what's wrong with the soup? He goes, would you mind just tasting it? He goes, is it too cold? He goes, could you just try the soup? He goes, is there a hair in it? He said, just try the soup. He said, is it too salty? He said, just try the soup. And he goes, oh, I can't. There's no spoon. And he goes, aha. And the reason I wanted to bring that up is sometimes that's what happens in training as well.
Glenda, that is fantastic. That is so relevant.
It tied in.
Where's the fucking leash? How are we going to fix this if there's no fucking leash on the dog?
Exactly. And this is the problem that we have with training is that sometimes we're just asking the wrong question. We just don't see the relevancy. For somebody like you or me or another trainer that's been around the block a few times and we've seen it before, for us it might be glaringly obvious. A person might come down to our studio or to our field and they'll bring a dog out and they'll show us the behavior and you go, oh, this is happening because of this. And it's glaringly obvious to me. Or we might have to do a little bit of groundwork to find out what's actually going on there. Ask a few questions, get a little bit investigatory in peeling back the layers. Like, what did you do? Who have you been to? Even things like I say to people, how old was the dog when you got it? What are the siblings like? People have presented behavioral problems to me before where I've said, what is the behavior like in the siblings? And they said, oh, yeah, they all do this. And I said, so it's genetic. And I go, oh, yeah, well, that's a problem. That's an issue that unfortunately I don't know if we're going to have much success in getting rid of this particular type of behavior where it's building a behavior.
Manage it.
Yeah, we can do something else about it, but sometimes people ask the impossible or sometimes they just don't know what the issue is. And it's like I said before in that joke where finally they get to the point of understanding, oh, there is no spoon here. It's like in The Matrix where the kid says, soon enough you'll understand there is no spoon. And that's where it starts to get really bizarre and freaky. But anyway, I'm not going to get into that bear trap.
You know,
here we go.
The Matrix where he goes to see the Oracle.
That's a great scene. That's where that scene comes from.
Do you remember at the start of that scene when he goes to see the Oracle, what she makes him do?
She makes it eat a cookie, yeah.
Accept the cookie,
yeah.
Which is every fucking website you go to now makes you accept the cookies. That movie was ahead of its time. It was incredible.
It truly was ahead of its time. It was an incredible movie, and I think that if you didn't leave the cinema, if you originally saw the first version of The Matrix when it came out, if you didn't leave that cinema feeling a little bit overwhelmed with what you just saw, then you're not really open to the message or messages in general. This is one thing that I'm very curious and often critical about when I'm watching other trainers learning about dog behavior is how much of this are you really taking in? What have you sat down, or have you just pre-prepared dialogue? Is that where you're sort of going with this? Regardless of whether it's messy or not, I think where a lot of people are really going wrong is they're just script preparing. They'll just have a bunch of questions that they ask, but they don't really understand the true meaning of observing the behaviors that they're to bear witness of. And that's one thing that comes, unfortunately, with the experience as well. You know, it is important in the early days, and I did it as well. Like, I had scripts prepared, and just listening to trainers, I thought, oh, that's a good question to ask. Oh, that's a good one. And I just thought that's an impressive thing to ask somebody. But sometimes it's not the right questions, and sometimes that's the point of there is no fucking spoon here. Why are you asking me all of these irrelevant questions? There is no spoon. As we're talking about the evolution of a dog's behavior, we also have to talk about the evolution of the handler's behavior, the handler's knowledge, the trainer's knowledge, the trainer's behavior, the trainer's experience, and the lines of questions that they're going to give you. Because all of this has a compounding effect on the results that you're actually going to get. And this is why with some trainers, you might see a minimal result. And it's not that they're not a good trainer. It's just that they don't understand yet, or they haven't had the experience with that doggy yet because they haven't seen enough of it. They don't understand to ask for the spoon in that little joke that we were telling before. They just don't understand it yet. Whereas people that do have experience in it and they do know how to get this congruency to all start to come together, they start seeing it for what it is. They start seeing it as, you know, like, we don't need to work on this behavior that you think is a problem right now because that's a satellite. We need to get to the core, the root cause of why these problems keep popping up and why other people are finding it difficult to diagnose and difficult to help you along with this is because they don't know what it is. You don't know what it is. And to be honest, the dog doesn't really even know what it is. Everybody's really confused. And that's where that discombobulated soup theory comes from, because there is so much awkwardness there and messiness. And it takes somebody who's a little bit of an oracle in that process to step in there and go, oh yeah, I've seen many of these problems before. Mate, you got to talking about the meditative and the ethereal side of life before, and as you have, and you've often brought it up, I'm starting to find that most people that I'm taking advice and guidance off these days have been through this process before, where they've started to look deeply into the universal way of things.
Within.
They've started to look within. Like, if you look at people who are musical geniuses, they're very much into meditative style of behaviors. It's not, the word's not ethereal. It's universal practices, I guess, is the way that people have started to explore it. And like I said, when I'm listening to podcasts and I'm hearing people who are at the top of their game, they're not people who have ignored this. They're people who have embraced it. They're people who are saying, there's more answers out there and I need to explore them. And if 20-year-old me in my 20-year-old bracket heard me saying this now, I'd be thinking, what fucking crack pipe are you smoking, dude? Like, you are off your tits, you know, like giving this advice to people. I think you need to go around the block a few times and you need to have some deep things happen to you and you need to experience life a little bit. And then you start to realize, oh, there's other layers here. There's other things to consider. Like, the script just doesn't work all the time. Like, everybody is selling the script, you know, and this is why we did an episode in this a while ago where we talked about there's a lot of people who really need or really start fitting into that cultish mindset where they really need this leader to guide them and just tell them how life is. It's that the life of Brian sort of thing. When people start fighting about the gourd or the sandal, they don't know what they don't know because they haven't had enough experience yet. They just think that this person who seems to have the answers is the right thing to do. So they very much will script base what they're doing, but it's not helping the handler and it's not helping the dog, because then people start getting in a fight about it. If this makes sense, people start fighting about it and spending more time fighting about it other than fixing the fucking problem, other than somebody coming up and saying there is no spoon. That's the problem. That's my big roundabout way of getting back to the problem, is that you haven't identified what the problem is. And things do get very messy and things do get very out of control quickly in those facets because somebody hasn't identified what the problem was. Sometimes it's just scaling things back. It's having the intelligence and the wisdom and fortitude and all of those things combined to say, we need to make this far less a lesson of what it is. You want bang. You want something exciting. You want flair. You want something for your money. And I will give it to you, but I can't give it to you the way you want it today. I've had people before that have said to me, well, that wasn't very exciting, especially when you do and see cases of aggression where people want to see the explosion. And as we've pulled apart and explored before on many a session, that's not the game here. The game was not to have the dog react. That's what you paid me for, not for the fireworks, not for the explosion. And in some cases where, and again, other sessions you and I've talked about where people do seminars, I don't know what people expect sometimes, but they're not going to see anything miraculous taking place. And if they do, maybe it was a combination of wonderful things all coming together, the right person, the right dog, the right training, the right environment for everything to come together, or it was a fucking fluke. It was just one of those days where it is a fluke. I had a fluke behavior with Mando the other day. We've got kangaroos jumping around all over the place at the moment, and it's part of the job that Narelle and I are working on. And there was one sitting right next to the fence line. I was out there playing with him and he looked at it, but something happened, and instead of him rushing down to look at the kangaroo, he deflected back onto me and he came into a perfect heel position. And I thought, holy shit, it was a fluke. It was an absolute fluke. I don't know why he did it. I don't even think he knows why he did it, but we all embraced it regardless. I didn't sit there with my mouth open and just think, holy shit, what was all that about? I thought, okay, the stars aligned for me today. This was a fluke, but I'm still going to embrace it anyway. The next day when we went out there, he took off. He ran down to look at the kangaroo. We've got things in play that we're working with and we're scaling it back and we're helping him out. And he's getting better with these type of things. He's getting less interested, less distracted by seeing the kangaroos, because now he's starting to think, well, now the kangaroos highlight that I'm going to do something cool with you. So rather than be overwhelmed by the kangaroos, I actually look at them and go, oh, cool, I'm going to do some shit with the boss. Like, we're going to have a bit of a game here and it's going to work out better in my favor than running down the fence. If I run down the fence, everything ends. Like, that's the end of the session. Like I said before, there are times where 20-year-old me would hear what I'm saying and think, no, you're wrong, dude. That's not the way to embrace it. Like going after this mystique or the ethereal or having a conversation with the universe, this is not the way to fucking handle this problem. The older head of me thinks, dude, you should shut the fuck up for a few decades and just take it in a little bit. Stop scripting everything so much. But it works. It gets there. Listen to me. Don't listen to me. Prestige Worldwide. I have to laugh. You were talking about before where you said we can't sometimes identify some of the clients that we're working with. Ever since we've done that episode with Gavin where we opened up and I was talking about my time with the Roddy Club and the committee, I have been inundated with clubs asking me to help solve their problems for them. It's actually been great. I've been enjoying some of the conversations I've been having with people, and not just in Australia, or around the world as well. So there have been people who have found that they've had some issues with big personalities and sometimes just a lot of conflict with how to get things moving between them and membership groups and so forth. And it's been some fun, interesting conversations to have with people. So I appreciate all of you. I don't want to talk about who you are or what club you belong to, but it's been fun.
You know, that's one of the most wonderful things about the podcast is we might talk about something. I think we talk about dogs a lot, but we talk about our own interests a fair bit. And like that recently got us labeled as conspiracy theorists. I'm a conspiracy enthusiast. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I'm an enthusiast. I like hearing about them. But when we talk about these other things that of interest to us and things that we do outside of dogs, the result is often quite amazing. Like to book a Zoom session with me, the only barrier to entry is you click and do it yourself, right? So when the Zoom sessions start up, I do that one day a week. The Zoom sessions start up, I don't know who's going to be there, right? Like I know the name, but you don't have to go through any gates to book the session. And so many of them these days are not, this is the problem with my dog. It's really interesting other stuff. Like, hey, Pat, you spoke about this thing and I just want to have, like, I want to explore that topic with you, or I want to look at dog training through that lens with you now because you mentioned this thing. So that's been wonderful. Like, I really enjoy that. I think that that's great. And if us telling stories of the trials and tribulations of our past resonates with someone, and then they can think, well, maybe I can hear those stories in more detail or bounce ideas off you and you can bounce them back through that lens, then great. So like, I think it's wonderful. I think it's cool. And you're a great person to do that. You've proven the successes and you can help guide people through that. So that's great. I think it's awesome.
Thank you, mate. I do want to just quickly close out by saying a big thank you to you and to the general community for letting me publicly express my grief with Randy and so forth. I'm not really a public person who I like to use social media to buy likes through grief and stuff like that. For me, I find that distasteful, but I did want to celebrate his life. He meant a hell of a lot to me. I'm in a much better place, a place of gratitude now. I took it quite hard for a while. It was a real beat up and I suffered through that entire session. It was a difficult one to do. And even editing and listening back to it, it stripped a little bit out of me. But I've had some really strong and powerful conversations with a lot of people in the community. And, you know, you helped me. Birdie's been her wonderful self. I need to talk to Birdie more about some of the things and the big feelings I had. But I got to talk to other people who'd recently lost their dogs, or you know, their dogs are going through some end-of-life situations at the moment. And that's one of the things I'm glad that we do have this broad connection with our community as well, is that we can talk about some of these fucking difficult things, frustrating things, difficult things, fun things, exciting things, things that we're exploring, things that we're thinking about. As we've advocated so many times on this podcast, is we're not claiming to be the experts of anything. We're just having a conversation. We're just taking people along for the ride. There are things that we're good at and there's things that other people are good at. It's exciting to combine some of those efforts so we can expand and broaden our horizons. But anyway, that was just me saying thanks for letting me air about the life and times of Randy. He'll be very much missed, but I have some incredible memories of that dog and I have some incredible memories of the people around him as well. Okay, that's the end.
All right. That's it for another episode of the Canine Paradigm.
Indeed.
As always, if you like what you hear, just like, rate, share, subscribe. Do that through whatever subscription service you download us from and go to another one. Do it there. They don't check.
Just remember the spoon.
Yeah, exactly. If you want to support the show, the best way to do that is to jump into Patreon.
Yep.
A few bucks a month gets you a giant backlog of information as well as new stuff going forward. I filmed a handling lesson that's uploading presently. That'll be in there soon.
Yeah, nice.
Someone gave me the shit, so I was like, that's it. We're doing a lesson.
Yeah, nice.
Get that camera, we can film it. We do live streams in there. I go live once a month for a couple of hours and just we answer whatever questions people have got. As well as if you wanted to support the show, you could buy a cool merch. You could buy a t-shirt. You could buy some wall tapestries. It always makes me really happy when people like some random reel comes up in my feed of someone training a dog and in the background there's our thing on the wall. When you said that we should get the wall tapestries, I was like, righto, Glenn. Okay.
I need one for my shed. I need a big tapestry.
Yep. Yeah, we'll get a couple. I still don't have one here. I've got the little small flag one. I've got the towel hanging as a wall tapestry.
And Casey's got about 3 of them and he sits in his shed and plays guitar to his dogs while he's got a tapestry in the background.
He's hogging them. So get one of those. That's cool. You can check that out. If you want to get in touch with us, best way to do that is to jump into the Facebook discussion group. In there's lots of cool people. There was one dickhead the other day and now he's gone. So
that's a good thing about being with cool people is that dickheads don't last long.
Yeah. So yeah, jump into there. But if you want to get in touch with us directly, shoot us an email. We are info@thecanineparadigm.com. Goodbye.